Welcome back to First Chapter Friday. This week I'm going to read the first chapter of one of my more recent favorites. It's not brand new, but recent as in the last 5 years or so. This is The Line Tender by Kate Allen. And here is chapter 1. This book is also beautifully illustrated here and there. Look at these. Adorable. Okay. I really like the quote at the beginning. We'll start there. And here's some more beautiful illustrations. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. Rachel Carson. Chapter 1. Shark. The morning the great white came to Rockport, my best friend and I were sticking our fingers into the coin returns of every payphone in town. We averaged about $2 a day during the summer. Most days we cashed in for candy. 75, 80, 85, I chanted, sliding the nickels around in his palm. We have $1.45. Fred shrugged and gestured with his head toward the store that sold gummies and penny candy. Sometimes I wondered if almost 13 was too old to be cleaning out payphones for candy, but no one was watching us, and it was hard to turn down free money. We headed over to the country store and, like magicians, turned quarters and dimes into gelatin-based sweets. I pushed open the door to the shop, walking into an incense and candy fog. Fred immediately went for the candy section. He knew what I liked, so I let him pick. I wandered over to the postcard rack. As I spun it around, it squeaked like a rusty playground swing. I scanned the column of familiar photos of Rockport, motif number 1, and twin lights, winding my red ponytail into a spiral with my finger. It was dark and cold in the shop, with the low wood beams and the painted floorboards. An older man dropped a coin into the player piano, which pushed out a quick song like the kind from a carousel. Fred dropped a plastic sack of gummies onto the glass countertop beside the register, and I walked over to see what he had chosen. He'd gone with a familiar mix, heavy on worms and frogs. Mrs. Lloyd weighed the bag. The beaded chain holding her reading glasses glittered like a ruby necklace. 0.33 pounds, Fred guessed. The window on the digital scale read 0.34. Not your day, she said, smiling at Fred. As Mrs. Lloyd pulled the bag of candy off the scale, the jangly bell over the shop door. The jangly bell rang over the shop door and stopped abruptly as the door slammed against the inside wall. A boy I'd never seen before came running in. Easy, said Mrs. Lloyd, tracking the boy with her eyes. Hey, the boy cried, his flip-flops smacking against the creaky wood floors. He ran to another kid whose arm was elbow deep in a barrel of fruity Tootsie Rolls, a candy neither Fred nor I bothered with. Face to face, the boy put his hands on the other boy's shoulders. I assumed they were brothers. Same thick, dark hair and identical molasses brown eyes. Huge shark! The hard K sound bounced off the ceiling. I watched the boys and waited for the rest of the story. What? The little brother's eyes were as wide as peanut butter cups. Fred walked over to the boys. Where? At the wharf. A fisherman dragged it in, said Big Brother. The boy was spitting like crazy. He looked like a 5th grader. From his excitement, I would have guessed it was a megalodon. He was wearing a Rockport t-shirt, which meant they weren't local, and they sounded like they were from the Midwest. I figured any shark was huge to them. Where are you from? I asked them. Ohio, said the Big Brother. You ever seen a shark before? I asked. Only at an aquarium. His eyes were still wide. I looked at Fred. Let's go, he said, snatching the gummies. Go where? I asked. Shark! Come on, he said, taking off into the bright sunlight. He left the door wide open, and I knew there would be a lecture from Mrs. Lloyd about air conditioning costs. So I pulled the door shut behind me as I followed him out. Okay, but we're not staying out there all day, I yelled ahead. We had plans to watch a movie at Fred's house. Fred looked back over his shoulder for a second, though he never stopped jogging. I kept my eye on him and took my time passing the Chinese import shop in the row of storefronts on the bottom floors of shingled houses, the ice cream shop covered in ivy, the telephone pole after telephone pole with a tangle of slack wires. It was hot, July hot. The last thing I wanted to do was hang around the wharf in zero shade. I didn't care what the fishermen had dragged up. I made the turn onto Dock Square, past the candy store with the taffy pole in the window, and then the asphalt turned into granite slabs as I made my way onto T Wharf. It was the spot in town where fishermen unloaded the catch. The crowd of people at the edge of the harbor blocked my view. I looked for Fred. The smell was strong. Not Gloucester Harbor strong, but fishy. It wasn't just the herring for the traps or the catch itself. There was an earthy smell that came from the algae green wood and the water that stood still inside the break wall. I spotted Fred and followed him as he wove his way through the people. It made me anxious and reminded me of trying to keep up with my dad at the 4th of July parade. I struggled to stay close to Fred, following in his path. I heard his voice before I saw the shark for myself. "Whoa," said Fred. I moved beside Fred, budging my way into the front row to see the shark's body being pulled by the hoist from just below the dock. As the mouth came closer, my eyes went straight to the huge, serrated teeth, gnarly and sticking out at different angles, rows and rows of white barbs poking out of the shredded gums, pink like strawberry taffy. My instinct was to move away, but I couldn't help walking toward it until we were nearly face to face. I imagined that my whole body could fit inside, as if I were sliding into a sleeping bag, the jaws opening around my hips. "Is that a great white?" I asked. "I'm pretty sure," said Fred. He pulled out his inhaler and took a puff. After his second puff, he said, "Your mom would know." I nodded. My mother would have known. That's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to stop there, but I am going to read the inside cover just so you get a little bit more information on what this book is about and see if it's a good fit for you. It says, funny, poignant, and moving, The Line Tender is a story of nature's enduring mystery and a girl determined to find meaning within it. Wherever the sharks led, Lucy Everhart's marine biologist mother was sure to follow. In fact, she was on a boat far off the coast of Massachusetts collecting shark data when she died suddenly. Lucy was 7. Since then, Lucy and her father have kept their heads above water, thanks in large part to a few close friends and neighbors. But on one steamy June day in her 12th summer, the tide brings in a great white, and then another tragedy, cutting short a friendship everyone insists was meaningful, but no one can tell Lucy what it all meant. To survive a new wave of grief, Lucy must grab the line connecting her depressed father, a stubborn fisherman, and a curious old widower to her mother's unfinished research on the great white's return to Cape Cod. Only with their help and her mother's beloved sharks will Lucy finally be able to look beyond what she's lost and toward what's yet to be discovered. It's a really beautiful story. It is full of a lot of recovery from grief. And if you love science and if you want to learn more, especially marine science, this book is definitely for you. But if you don't like to cry, don't read it. I'm already crying because I know what comes next. Check it out from the Alameda Free Library and see you next time on First Chapter Friday.